Shalom, shalom family. Welcome once again to the D.C.B channel. My name is Uzziah Lewy, one of the teachers at congregation D.C.B CHOKMAH, located at 382 Hamilton Avenue, Brooklyn, New York. In the Red Hook section of Brooklyn, thanking the Most High King of all things and everything for life, food, clothing, and shelter, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And I'm thankful to this mighty King for all things and everything that he does for us in our lives. We understand that he is God and God alone, and besides him there is no Savior. So really thankful to this mighty King for giving us all life, for giving us sustenance, for giving us all the things that we need in order to live on this earth, and for bringing us to another season of Passover and CHOKMAH, where the Most High God liberated the children of Israel from under the iron furnace and from under the oppressive hand of Paro, or Pharaoh, as we know him better, king of Egypt. I'm grateful to this mighty King, and I'm thankful to this mighty King for all of your lives, and I pray that the Creator of heaven and earth will continue to protect us all. Thanking you all for tuning in, but as we get closer to Pesach, we make it a habit to go over thoroughly the rules, the do's and the don'ts of Pesach, so that us as teachers will be doing our job and guiding the people in the right way, and trying not to cause anyone to go astray, right? We understand that sometimes mistakes are made. That's understood, but we try our best to guide people in the right path and cause people to do the things that they are supposed to do, to not be in fault or at fault with the Creator of heaven and earth. So I want to first start off by giving a general announcement, or PSA. The PSA is that for those who, and I don't know if everyone caught our video, for those who for some reason plan to come out to Pesach, we still have a kind of like a skeleton crew, but if you do want to come out, we implore everyone that does want to come out, that hasn't been coming out, visitors that come from out of wherever you come from, to have an extensive COVID test. That's 48 hours prior to the day that you're going to come out. So most people will come out on the Shabbat, because knowing that Pesach comes in on the Shabbat, and then we go into the night of the first day of Feast of Unleavened Bread, or the night of watching. We will ask everyone to have a COVID test that's 48 hours prior to that period of time that you're going to be there, and also to wear your mask and to take all the precautions in order for us to be safe, because COVID is real, and we don't want to have anyone get sick. Any of us that's been coming out, we don't want to get sick, and we don't want you to get sick, or anyone that's coming to visit us to get sick. So if that's what you're doing, we ask you to please be careful and take those precautions before you come out. During these times, as we see over 500,000 people dead, very real. We don't want to jeopardize anyone, and we ask you to please please consider us. So you know what they say, like an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure, or whatever it is, that however the saying goes. So We pray that the Most High God be with us all and bless us. So now, I know that we have 2 chats going. I got one here on Zoom. So I will just ask you on Zoom if you have questions to raise your hand, because I'm not going to be regularly checking the Zoom chat. But if you on YouTube, you could just basically you could write your questions down on the actual chat. I'll be observing that one regularly. Hopefully, Sister Daphne's on it, and the other admins on YouTube, Imahavaret. So, without any further ado, I turn it over to my brother, Rabbi Chief Binyamin. Rabbi, how are you today?
Shalom to you and shalom to everybody. Giving praise and honor to the Most High and thanking Him for our lives and the season that we are approaching. You know, I'm doing good, and hopefully everybody else is doing well also during this time as we begin to prepare. And this is basically a joyous preparation, something that we're looking forward to. You know, during this time, or as people are cleaning their homes and everything that belongs to them, that maybe seem like a frustrating part, but you know, we are basically getting ready to worship, praise, and honor the Most High for the season that is approaching us and the time of our deliverance out of Egypt, the house of bondage. So definitely, once again, this is a joyous season that we should all be looking forward to. And we thank the Most High for allowing us the opportunity to even know about this season, even beyond that, to know about Him and to know about who we are as the children of Yisrael and the season, once again, that we are approaching. So as Chief Uziel mentioned, you know, we welcome everybody to our services that are viewing, and hopefully we'll be able to make a good presentation in the sight of the Most High God on behalf of all the children of Israel who will be joining us online, you know, during this season. And
yeah. So you could take it away, Chief, and I'll be right back, like I told you before.
Okay. Also, just I may do it, so just leave the screen or allow screen share if you haven't already. Actually, yes.
I made you
already.
A co-host. I made you a co-host.
Yes, it. So let's see it. All right, torah. So once again, just giving praise and honor to the Most High and thanking Him for our lives, thanking Him for strength, for good health, and once again thanking Him for this season that we are that is upon us. And it's a season that takes preparation only because of what we're commanded to remove from our homes during this time. And because of that, and you know, living where we live in the diaspora, you know, it takes a little bit more work to really to do that. But it's, once again, it's definitely a joyous season and something that we want to enjoy. We want to go into with a positive mind, you know, positive thought, and just praying that the Most High God will bless us. So as it was just mentioned, if anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat. You know, but there are moderators out there for the chat. But in the meantime, just gonna briefly go over things that we've been speaking about. You know, last Shabbat, you know, we had the conversation on Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Also, we've done this presentation. We're not going to do it in full at this time, but this presentation has been done before on this channel, and in the future, Chief Uziel will actually put the links for those videos when we did the full presentation in the description for this video, so people could always refer to it. We don't want to rehash the same you know, information if it's not necessary. We don't want to be redundant. So, you know, the presentation in terms of what Passover is about, what the Feast of Unleavened Bread is about, and you know, everything like that is what we're going to be dealing with this evening. So once again, just overall, just starting from the beginning, there's also a document that the congregation has, and it's on debate D.C.B website. On the bottom, you could click on it, and you will see a link in regards to Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So I'll actually pull it up so people can directly see that as well while we're discussing it. And once again, just want to invite anybody that has questions. Our prayer is that the Most High God will bless us all with knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, so that way we would do the right things in His sight. So once again, I'm just gonna show everybody where the link is for. So if you go to DCB.org, then at the bottom of the main page where it says downloads, you'll see this link that says Pesach Passover regulations, and that is the document. You click on that, it opens the document for the congregation and our explanation of what this season is about. So just want to thank everybody for their participation in our services. Continue to share and subscribe, and this is basically even though we're talking and everybody is listening and you get an opportunity to type, we basically encourage open dialogue. We are all in the learning process, regardless of how long or how little of a time we may consider ourselves in this way of life. We're all in the learning process, because being in the diaspora, we've all been influenced by different things, and it just causes us to read the Holy Scriptures in a different manner. But we want to definitely do what's good and right in the sight of the Most High, and we acknowledge Him. We acknowledge that there's none beside Him. So we all want to consciously do the right thing. So we don't do these things for malice. We definitely don't do things to uplift our own name. We're going to make mistakes along the way, but we definitely want to make sure that we're doing the right thing at all times. Also, because I did see a question, and our time permitting, we'll get back into some other questions, but right now our focus is strictly on Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So the question in regards to the working on the new moon is acknowledged. Time permitting, we'll get into that towards the end of this talk, but we just want to focus on Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread for this presentation, for this video that's going to actually be up. So once again, this season is upon us. In terms of the standard calendar, Passover comes in on March 27th, and the reason why that's being said, because the 14th day of the first month is going to be March 27th, and Passover is actually the period of time where the Passover lamb would be slaughtered and presented as an offering. And then when the sun goes down, then the 15th day of the first month begins. And the 15th day of the first month, once again on the Hebrew calendar, the 15th day of the first month begins CHOKMAH, which is the Hebrew term for Feast of Unleavened Bread, which lasts for 7 days. So the Feast of Unleavened Bread will actually conclude on what it is known as April 3rd, but also that'll be the 21st day of the first month on the Hebrew calendar, the month of Abib. So there's preparation that has to be done in order to observe the Feast of Unleavened Bread properly. We read within the scriptures that the reason why we observe the Feast of Unleavened Bread is because when we were leaving out of Egypt, when the Most High God passed over the land of Egypt, where he killed the firstborn of the Egyptians, man and beast, that the Egyptians pushed us out, because that was the final plague, that was the final sign and wonder that the Most High God inflicted upon Egypt, so that the children of Israel would be released. So as a result of that final plague, and the Most High God already told us ahead of time that we would be forced out of the land of Egypt, because the Egyptians wouldn't be able to take it anymore. So as a result, there's a process, in terms of making bread. And that's really what this season is about. It said that we did not have time to let our dough rise. So because we left Egypt in haste. So in order to commemorate that event, in order to have that memorialized, the Most High God has commanded us to eat unleavened bread for 7 days, because we had to bake our bread in haste. We did not have enough time to allow the dough to rise in order to make leavened bread. Also as important note, the process of leavened bread was actually, historically, based on records, the process of leavened bread was actually invented, for lack of a better term, in Egypt. It was said that possibly somebody made some dough to make what it wasn't called a leavened bread, it was just called basically bread at the time, because that was the only way bread was made. But somebody made some dough, they left it over for a period of time, and through that period of time, yeast began to grow on that dough. And when that dough was actually baked, then you had a lighter, softer bread. And so they said that basically, like most inventions, were found by mistake. So leavened bread, or what we know as bread today, the form of bread that we know today throughout the world, was actually invented, once again, as a lack of a better term, in Egypt. So we were used to doing that as Israel in the land of Egypt. But once again, when we were leaving Egypt, we didn't have enough time to actually make leavened bread. So we had to make unleavened bread, and that's what we were eating on our way out of the land of Egypt. So God is telling us, in order to remember that, remember what God did for us, we eat the unleavened bread. We're forced, for lack of a better term, once again, by the commandment of God, to eat unleavened bread for 7 days to remember what we ate coming out of Egypt. So that is the basis of this discussion, and that is basically the purpose, once again, of the season. So in preparation of that, God tells us that we have to remove all leavening from our homes before the Feast of Unleavened Bread comes in. So there are many scriptures that tell us about that. Exodus chapter 12, the entire chapter describes the entire process of the Exodus, from the slaughter of the Passover lamb, to God passing over Egypt that night, to us leaving out of Egypt. And within that chapter, we're given the commands that we're supposed to uphold. Like, specifically in chapter 12, verse 15, where it says, 7 days shall you eat unleavened bread, howbeit the first day you shall put away leaven out of your houses, for whosoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. And then later on in verse 19 of the same chapter, it says, 7 days shall there be no leaven found in your houses, for whosoever eats that which is leavened, that soul shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he be a sojourner or one that is born in the land. So we have to remove leavening from our homes prior to the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and especially for this year, because the Sabbath day will come in before the first day of the leavened bread. So we definitely want to be in compliance with that. So leavening, or leaven, you'll see that when it says leavening or leaven, by definition, is anything. Today they use yeast, but it's any agent that is used to make dough rise, or basically to cause dough, which is something that's made from grain, to ferment. So once again, back in Egypt, what they used was the sourdough, which was the dough that was left over. So even today, as we're making unleavened bread, we have to make sure that we don't leave the dough that we're making, for too long. When you roll the dough out and you're making with the intent of making that bread, you roll the dough out, start making the bread, and don't leave any of that dough over, because you don't want to allow that dough to leaven or that dough to ferment and become sourdough, which would be something that's prohibited for us. But today, there are other things that are used in order to leaven dough or to make dough ferment. Today there's active yeast, or dry active yeast, which is actually packaged. Also another procedure in ancient times that was used was balm. So it's basically a froth from some sort of fermented liquor that the Egyptians also used in order to add to dough to make the dough rise or to make the dough ferment. But once again, balm is already something that is fermented from a malt liquor to put into the dough. So there were different procedures that were used back then to make dough rise or to make dough ferment. So those procedures cannot be used today. And even if there are new procedures today to cause dough to ferment, we cannot use those procedures today. So in general, we want to get rid of the sourdough or not make any sourdough. We want to get rid of all of the yeast and all of the baking soda and baking powder in our homes, in our possession. So once again, dealing with, our homes, because, the verse says in Exodus chapter 13, verse 7, in addition to what was said in Exodus chapter 12, that unleavened bread shall be eaten throughout the 7 days, and there shall no leavened bread be seen with thee, neither shall there be leaven seen with thee in all thy borders. So once again, adding that to the verses that were read in chapter 12, we're supposed to remove leavening from our houses, or as, including the verse 7 of chapter 13, from our borders. So that's anything that we have control over. So if you own a house or if you're renting a house, you're not supposed to have leavening in that entire house. You can't hide it in the house. You can't put it somewhere where you don't see it because it's still in your house. And so once again, anything that you have control over, anything that you have access to, whether you completely own it or you're renting it, that's your house or your borders. That's something that you possess. So you just have to get rid of it completely. But once again, focusing on leavening being the sourdough, yeast, baking soda, balm, and we'll also put the full list later on, that these are the things that you would have to remove from your possession. So you definitely want to make sure that you completely remove that. So these are the things that we just have to be careful of during the season. And once again, just looking into the chats once again, so if anybody has any questions, they could always put it in there, and we'll answer it. But if not, do we just give it a full explanation of how we observe the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And once again, we don't want to do anything that's going to cause us to go astray or cause anyone else to go astray. So what I'll do at this time is, in addition to, and once again, this is also found on the same document that you would find on the D.C.B website, that these are the list of ingredients that we should look out for. So once again, along the sourdough was already mentioned, balm was already mentioned, and baking soda, baking powder was already mentioned, yeast was already mentioned. But this list of what is called leavening agents, or things that are used today that causes dough to become leavened. And once again, our focus is on dough because that's what God commanded us. Because once again, remember, this is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So we're not supposed to eat leavened bread during this time. So any dough that comes from any grain. So you talk about wheat, you talk about spelt, you talk about rye, you talk about oats. So, these are the grains that you have to, that you can use to make bread and make your unleavened bread, but you can't allow the dough of these grains to rise. And these list of ingredients are the things that are added to grain, to dough, to cause the grain to ferment in order to make the lighter bread that we're used to eating, throughout the year. So these are the ingredients that you have to look out for, not just from the products that you eat, but also products that you use, such as toothpaste, mouthwash, lotions, creams, anything that any cosmetic items, anything that you use, vitamins as well. And once again, just making a distinction between vitamins and medicine. So, when you're, buying vitamins and things like that, these are the ingredients that you would have to look for. So that's why we usually do this presentation, about 2 weeks before, to give all of us an opportunity to clear our houses of these things, to start using up these products beforehand. So once again, this is the list of things that we should be looking for, and this list of things are the things that would have to be completely removed from our homes, for the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So we have to make sure that we do not have any of these things in our homes, during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So we're just trying to do this concise. Once again, this presentation was done in full before, so the links for that will be put up in the description of the videos of this video at a later time for people to click on and watch. They both lengthy, mainly not just the presentation part, but the questions. So some of the questions people have maybe answered in those questions, but at this time we also invite people to ask questions, and pray that the Most High God would give us the proper answer for any questions that may be asked during this time. And if not, just going to touch on a couple of other subjects. So deal with Passover. Many congregations will have lamb. And along with the lamb, you have, of course, your unleavened bread. And along with that, you have bitter herb. As these are the things that are listed in the scripture as part of the Passover meal, so to speak, for lack of a better term, the Passover meal. Of course, with other foods that are permissible during this time. And so we just want to make sure, at a later date, we'll go into more depth into the bitter herb, because we're not trying to focus on a lot of the controversy now. We're trying to focus on the things that we can do together. But there are controversy in some things based on various congregations, such as the bitter herb. We can answer that question if that comes up, such as the bitter herb and other things like that. But these are the things that, once again, are part of the Passover service, and these are the things that are commanded by God. So we're just praying for a joyous season to come, praying that the Most High God will bless us and causes us to have an open mind, and hopefully none of us makes any mistakes in the things that we do during this season.
Hallelujah. Let me see. Well, there's always been a question about vinegar. What is your take on vinegar? I know for many years I've kept vinegar out, but what is the problem with vinegar?
Worldwide, vinegar is actually used as part of the Passover service. So worldwide, and when I say worldwide, I'm even talking about Israelites. I especially talk about Israelites worldwide, not just in this part of the diaspora, but in Africa and what we would know as the Middle East, Asia. Vinegar is actually part of the one of the items used in part of the Passover meal, so to speak. One of the items, once again, in what is known as the Passover Seder. So in general, there is no problem with vinegar, just like there's no problem with wine. The issue with wine and vinegar and things like that is that if you're not making it on your own, then you just have to be careful of the source of, or the company that you're buying it from. Now, if you do the research on your own in terms of, and just adding wine to the conversation as well, because both are fermented. So there's a misconception in terms of fermentation being something that's not allowed during the season. But once again, as what we read, it's the leavened bread that's not allowed during the season. So wine, vinegar are things that are just used in general. There's very few congregations that do not permit wine and vinegar. But once again, even with permitting it, you have to be careful of how it's made, because alcoholic beverages today, as well as vinegar, there's a starter. Just like for dough, there's a sourdough starter. there's a starter for wine and vinegar, which is called distiller's yeast. So if the vinegar is started with a distiller's yeast, or the wine was started with a distiller's yeast, or it's called as alcohol yeast for wine, then it would not be permissible during this season. But if the wine and the vinegar was made naturally without the introduction of anything else, just storing it in the vat, and however they make the process, seeping in a little bit of oxygen at a time, to cause it to ferment on its own naturally, then neither would be a problem. But for those that may have concerns with the vinegar, and you say you may not have enough time to get rid of it all, just don't use it. If you're not because once again, the punishment of being cut off is eating leavened bread during the 7 days. So don't feel guilty if you have wine or vinegar in your house that you're unsure of whether you should use or not. Just don't use it. But once again, going back to the list that was put on the screen, those are the things you absolutely have to get rid of. So there's no storing of leavening at all, even though you're not using it. So those are the things, the list that was put up earlier, definitely, making sourdough, definitely the yeast, definitely balm, definitely baking soda, and everything else on the list that was posted. Those are the things you have to absolutely remove from your house. But the things that are questionable, just don't use it during that season if you're unsure of how it was made.
Okay, so just a little deeper explanation. So basically, what you're saying is that all right, how will we know if these products don't have these distiller's yeast? Will they have a symbol? Can we trust the kosher for Passover symbols? Can we trust any of that?
So for wine, you'll see certain wines that say kosher for Passover, and their claim is that they do not use, or those companies do not use, a starter yeast in making their wine. When it comes to the vinegar, you would just have to contact the company directly and see what their procedure is for making the vinegar, because you may not see like a kosher for Passover vinegar, because you'll just see vinegar, so to speak. Because once again, wine and vinegar are not outlawed for the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's a process that may be used to starting them that would be outlawed. So it's just a matter of doing the research. So in terms of a general, whether you should trust a kosher for Passover wine, that's their claim. So we could only go by the claim that they have. It's like with anything else that we buy. When we read ingredients and we're avoiding pork and anything that's unclean, we just trust what we read and just pray to the Most High God that these companies that we're buying from are telling the truth on their packaging. So we would just have to go through the same thing when it comes to kosher for Passover, that we're going to trust, what's on the packaging, and what we don't know, just praying that the Most High God would shield us from anything, as long as we go into it wholeheartedly. If we just buy any, for those that drink wine, if you just buy wine and it doesn't say kosher for Passover and you want to trust it, then that's on you, because you didn't do the research to see if it was okay or not. But if something that's packaged kosher for Passover, their claim is that it wasn't made with a starter, so you would trust it based on that.
Someone asked a question, can I buy lamb from halal?
So in terms of I see when I read and I hear so many different explanations of what halal is or what they do for halal. Some people say that there's definitely a prayer that's said before it's slaughtered. Some people just say halal is just what we would consider clean. If they're not dedicating the lamb or whatever animal that they're slaughtering to their God, then it would be okay. Just because it says halal, that just means that's what they accept, in Islam. But the main thing is just for us to make sure that we're, buying things that God will be, accepting of. So when you go to a slaughterhouse, it could be a halal slaughterhouse, and you can just ask questions because everybody's probably going to do something different. So it's hard to really just give a base one answer on that, because different slaughterhouses may do different things, and once again, there's so many different so much different information on what people do to make something halal. So I don't want to just give a generic answer on that. But if you go to a specific place, just ask them questions in terms of their procedure for slaughtering.
All right, question online. If someone ends up purchasing too much lamb for the Passover and can't eat it all that night, what do they do with the remains?
Okay, so the question would be based on where we read in scripture where God commands us that when we slaughter the lamb, and this would be yearly in the land of Israel, that when we slaughter the Passover lamb, that it has to be, roast entirely, and you have to eat it all that night, and the rest would be burned in the morning. And that's because that lamb that is slaughtered is a sacrifice. The lamb, as we are eating it today, is not a sacrifice, so it wouldn't fall under the same procedures as a sacrifice. So, if you're buying lamb today, you end up having, excess lamb from that night, you could still eat that lamb past the morning because it's not a sacrifice. So that command was given to us because there are other offerings that have the same procedure that, when it comes to certain peace offerings, you have to eat it the same day. There are some types of peace offerings that you can eat on the second day, but definitely not on the third day. But that's where that command comes from in terms of not letting it go past the morning. But today, being that we don't have sacrifices, we're not at the house of God in the land of Israel, and we don't have the priests available that are giving sacrifices, everything that we buy to, in terms of lamb or any meat that we eat is going to be just for food only. So there would be nothing wrong with eating the remains of the lamb, past the morning.
So my follow-up question with that would be, what about the people who say that you can't eat leftovers? Because there is a school of thought out there that you cannot eat leftovers. Anything that's left over. Can you explain that a little bit?
That may be coming from a thought of fermentation being wrong during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, but there's no command that tells us that we can't eat leftovers during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Because the bread that we make on one day, we might eat on the second day, third day. For those that buy the box matzot, that was made definitely days, weeks, ahead of when you're eating it. So there's no command that said that we cannot eat leftovers. So that's why we always refer back to the scripture where the command is not to eat leavened bread for those 7 days. Other things that come along the way are things that, they're precautions, because, we want to be careful, especially during this time. We want to be careful when it comes to keeping the commands of God. So there's a lot of merit in being careful. But along with being careful, that's why at our congregation, we also focus on what is known as the letter of the law. We focus on teaching that. And then the precautions, we just specify them as precautions. Like when you read the document mentions that our congregation avoids vinegar, we avoid cheese, we avoid canned goods. None of those 3 items are prohibited for the Feast of Unleavened Bread, but those are just precautions because we don't know the process that's involved with the making of these things. But if you do, so if somebody researches, like I say, if anybody researches on their own and finds out that a cheese that they buy has no leavening agent put into it, we can't tell somebody that the cheese that they're eating is wrong. So once people do research on the things that they buy, like if somebody has vinegar and they did the research and the company didn't make the vinegar with a starter, we can't tell them that they're wrong for using vinegar during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The same with wine. So going back to the question of the leftovers, we're not commanded not to eat leftovers, so we can't tell people that you can't eat leftovers. But if that's a precaution that people do, we can't fault them for the precaution, because there's merit in that as well.
I just want to say, we understand that we don't do the Passover. The Passover is the offering, but we are commanded to keep the 7 days of CHOKMAH, of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And that's throughout wherever we're at. We're commanded to do that. So CHOKMAH definitely is something that we must perform even in captivity if we're able to.
Right, because the Passover, once again, is the lamb. So we can't, we can't keep Passover. So technically, what happens is, people say, and they're right, you don't keep Passover outside of the land, or you don't keep Passover in captivity, which is absolutely right. So that's why even with the document that's there, it says it's called Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, because they're two separate thought process. Well, the Feast of Unleavened Bread is the actual event, or the actual holy days, the 2 holy days, starting and finish, and the 7-day feast that we'll be having. Passover itself is the sacrifice that would take place before the Feast of Unleavened Bread comes in. So just relating to the question earlier of what to do with the lamb if all of it is not eaten that night, and we say that you can continue eating it past the morning, is because we don't actually have a Passover lamb. The lamb that people would eat that night is also a memorial of what we would be eating in the land.
So, let me see here. So basically let me see if I could put this right. So what you're saying basically is that the emphasis is on the leavened bread and the foods that have the leavened bread in it, right?
The leavening agents
The leavening
agents.
Right, the leavening agents. One of them being yeast, right? But the emphasis on being cut off is those who eat leavened bread.
Right.
So if someone has, what is your opinion? If someone has maybe a product that has yeast in it, right? They have yeast in it. But let's say it's like a cosmetic product, lotion, whatever. But they don't use it during that time, but they don't throw it away. Are they in violation?
They wouldn't be in violation, obviously, definitely of not, or of eating leavened bread during that time. But because we're commanded to remove leaven from our homes for those 7 days, I would definitely suggest get rid of anything that has yeast in it. So that way we don't sin into, because it's twofold. We're supposed to remove leaven from our houses for those 7 days, and we're not supposed to eat leavened bread for those 7 days. So it's two commands, but one actually leads to the other, because the leaven, when you remove the leaven from your home, then you wouldn't be able to have any leavened bread. But we live in a world today that puts all types of ingredients, just in general, all throughout the year. We have to avoid certain things, because they put pork in a lot of products, or a lot of unclean things in products, shellfish and different things in products that we don't even eat. So this season is no different than what we would do throughout the year. That things that are unclean, we don't want them in our homes, period. And the same thing during the season, we don't want leaven in our homes, period. So yeah, if there's any yeast or any of the things on this list, in any products that you have in your house, then get rid of those products before the Feast of Unleavened Bread comes in.
So then, what about the people that will say that and I'm just putting out because there's really no questions, so I'm just giving out the questions that the arguments that have been happening throughout the years. So what about the people that said that yeast is something that happens naturally within the atmosphere? You can never remove really yeast from anything, because yeast is something that's in the air. So how can you remove yeast? How do you remove yeast when yeast is something that naturally occurs?
So you wouldn't be removing the naturally occurring yeast. You'd be removing the harvested yeast. So yeast is yeast. So just to give a basic intelligent answer, yeast is yeast. So dealing once again with the sourdough, the procedure with that is once someone rolls out dough, they have grain, they mix it with water, they knead it, and then they leave it. The yeast that's in the air, as you mentioned, would attach itself to the dough, and that yeast that's naturally occurring would cause that dough to ferment, or as we would use the term today, cause that dough to become leavened. We can't stop that. So that's why in general, and once again, there's a Hebrew word called sa'or that is translated as leaven that God commands us to remove from our homes. That's literally sourdough and barm. That word sa'or wouldn't include yeast because, as you mentioned, yeast is something that's naturally occurring. However, when you harvest yeast, and once again, now I know I keep switching back the lists, but when you harvest yeast and then you make baker's yeast, that becomes a problem because you actually harvested the yeast to make an ingredient. So you have to remove that ingredient that was harvested from your homes. So that would be the difference. You can't stop yeast from proliferating through the air and attaching itself to things. So that's why going back to the sourdough, or when you're making dough, you can't leave that dough all day and let the yeast proliferate on it. You have to make that dough, knead that dough, and then start making your bread from that. So there's also here brewer's yeast. You will see in some products autolyzed yeast. So any of those yeast, that's yeast that's harvested in order to make an ingredient. And once it's harvested to become an ingredient, then that ingredient itself is leaven. But just basic yeast that's in the air, as you said, of course, we can't remove that. So that's why literally the focus is on not having sourdough in your house, not having barm in your house. And just quickly, also adding baking powder and baking soda to those. Everything on this list is probably you're not going to see everything. So that's why during this time of year it's really not that difficult to comply with, because there's not really that much to get rid of. The precautions that we put upon ourselves makes it harder to comply with. But when it comes to just reading what the law is and what we're told not to have in our homes or what not to eat, that's the easy part to comply with.
Also, I've just shared the link for the list that Chief Binyamin is presenting, so that you could download it for yourself. It's on the YouTube chat. You could download it. You could download the list there. Any more questions to anyone out there?
And we definitely want to just enjoy ourselves this season, and definitely not make it a drag on ourselves, our families, our friends. During the season, we want to go into this with joy. Even the cleaning process, we've heard the term for years, even amongst our congregations, about spring cleaning. For areas that's not warm all throughout the year. This is the time where it starts getting warmer, and you just get that good feeling when it comes to just cleaning your house, period. Also, along with cleaning your house, just cleaning your mind, just being able to, once again, if you're not in an area that's warm all throughout the year, you get the opportunity to be outside more and to clear your mind. This is the season also, once again, clearing your houses, clearing your mind, clearing out your body as well. As we're minimizing all of these leavening products from our diet, it helps our body to rejuvenate itself as well during this season. Of course, that's not the reason the command is given unto us, but we take advantage of the opportunities to clear our minds and our bodies, when we have the opportunity to.
All right, it seemed like everyone has asked all their questions. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to touch on, Rabbi.
No, that should be it. We just wanted to hopefully give a comprehensive overview of the season, the things that we should be looking out for, the things that we should be preparing for, and once again, our biggest preparation that we should be focusing on is just enjoying the season overall. So in the process, start minimizing the leavening in your homes. Once again, focus on that list of things as the things that you should absolutely not have in your house, along with the sourdough bomb. Once again, those are the things you should absolutely not have in your house during this season. And everything else, just do your research and make sure that there's none of those things in the products that you're using. So that's why, because of what happens today, we focus more on the wine, we focus on vinegar, because we don't control, there are wine makers, there are vinegar makers in our community. So those are the people we would trust. But, when it comes to everything else, you just have to be careful. But if you did your research and the company is in compliance with the laws of God, then nobody can tell you that you can't use those products such as wine and vinegar and things like that during the season.
Hallelujah. So the Rabbi Chief Binyamin for bringing forth this here explanation, thanking the Creator of heaven and earth for your life and the life of everyone that's in the chat. Once again, just a quick PSA to everyone. Don't forget that we at D.C.B, we're still under the COVID restrictions, and we're still following New York State and the CDC's rules on how we should proceed and move forward with COVID and how our houses of worship are supposed to be ran. We ask those that would like to attend that don't normally attend to please have a 48-hour extensive COVID test 48 hours prior to the time that we're going to be there. And also remember to cover your faces with a mask. And like I said before, I'm a couple of years off from not coming out and gathering and doing things like that. It's better than having your life cut short and having this thing affect us or affect our family members because one of us done left up out of here for the rest of their lives and causing sadness within our family. So, let's just be precautious. Hopefully by next year, I know we said this last year, but hopefully by next year, we could be seeing, as they say, some light at the end of the tunnel, and we don't have to be worried about this as much as we are still to this day. Still a lot of people passing away. So I see that Mikhail Yisrael, all right. I didn't answer this question earlier because it really doesn't have to do anything with the Q&A that we're having today. The Q&A is on Pesach, but your question, Shalom, I had a question about working on the new moon. There's absolutely nothing wrong with working on the new moon. The days in Leviticus 23 that are pointed out are the days that the Most High God said for us not to work and do any kind of laborious work or the holy days, what we are allowed to do for the holy day. But it doesn't speak about that, about the new moon. It doesn't say you cannot work on the new moon unless the new moon falls on
Shab-
on the
Shabbat.
Shabbat day.
And definitely Yom Teruah, which is a new moon.
Yom Teruah, right. But generally, it's no prohibition against working on the new moon if it doesn't fall on that new moon on the seventh month. Definitely, that one we're not working on, and any other new moon that falls on the actual seventh day Shabbat. So there goes your answer, Mikael. So, with that being said, thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget to share the link. Don't forget, if you want to give any donations, you can hit the money symbol at the bottom, or you could donate to us at info@DCB.org. That's for PayPal. Also, you could donate to us on Zelle at the same email address, info@DCB.org. info@DCB.org, and you can also donate to us on Cash App at the money symbol Beit DCB, BEIT DCB. That's for everyone out there that would like to donate. All your donations are appreciated, and we pray that the Creator of heaven and earth continue to be with you and bless you all. Shalom, shalom, la la tov. May everyone have a blessed night. Hallelujah.